Am I on? Okay. So today we are starting Judges. We're going to do Judges 1, 2, and 3. But before we do, can you turn me down just a little bit? Do a quick recap. So we had Moses carry us through Exodus, Leviticus, just a little bit. Exodus, Leviticus, Numbers, and Deuteronomy. He brought them out of captivity to the land that God had promised them. But he didn't take them into the land. He turned it over to Joshua. Then we're into the book of Joshua, where Joshua subdues the land, but then it's for the tribes to go in and occupy their different territories. When he dies, he doesn't turn it over to anybody. He leaves it in God's hands. So it starts off right. The people of Israel go to God, and they ask They ask God, who should go up before us? And God tells them that All right, let me calm down a little bit. This is kind of nerve-wracking. Okay. God tells them that Judah will go up before them. It starts off right. They inquire of God, what should we do? And God says, Judah. And that's going to be important as we read through this, because God tells them what to do. And the question is, do they do it? When God tells us what to do we do what he says to do, how he says to do it? And as we read through, we're going to have the answer to that question. And I'm going to ask you to forgive me up front because I have a lot of so if you can mute me when I do that. And if it's a problem, then I'll just go without a mic and speak louder. Okay. You know what? I had one. Thank you for reminding me. Let's see, before we get into chapter 1, I'm going to start off in chapter 2, verse 6 through 10, because it'll give us an idea of where this is going to go. So chapter 2, verse 6. Then Joshua sent the people away, and the sons of Israel. Well, let me back up. The reason I'm doing this is because when we get into chapter 2, it kind of, like in a movie where you're in the middle of a movie and it goes back and tells you what happened. So in chapter 2, it's going to give us an idea of where we start off in chapter 1. Chapter 2, verse 6. Then Joshua sent the people away, and the sons of Israel went each to his inheritance to possess the land. And the people served Yahweh all the days of Joshua and all the days of the elders who survived Joshua, who saw all the great work of Yahweh which he had done for Israel. Then Joshua the son of Nun, the servant of Yahweh, died at the age of 110. And they buried him in the territory of his inheritance in Timnath-Heres, in the hill country of Ephraim, north of Mount Gash. And all that generation also were gathered to their fathers. And there arose another generation after them who did not know Yahweh, or even the work which he had done for Israel. So the picture is, you have all the people who are traveling around the desert with Moses. That generation dies. Then you have Joshua who takes them to the land of Israel. That generation dies. Joshua gets them to the land, subdues the land, but they're supposed to conquer and occupy the land. That generation dies. So this generation that we're going to read about, starting in chapter 1, they never saw any of the miracles in the desert. They didn't see any of the plagues. They didn't see the crossing of the Red Sea. They didn't see the manna. They didn't see the water from the rock. They saw none of that. The generation that died with Joshua, they were raised up. They saw it, but they weren't part of the struggle. So now this generation has no idea of the miracles that God did. They're coming into a land and they're told to go into a land. They have no leader. They're counting on a God that they don't know, and they're expected to take the land. So when we start off chapter 1, verse 1 of Judges, now it happened after the death of Joshua that the sons of Israel asked of Yahweh, saying, who shall go up first for us against the Canaanites to fight against them? Starts off great. They don't know Yahweh, they have no leader, but they inquiring of the Lord. And Yahweh said, Judah shall go up. Behold, I have given the land into his hand. I want you to remember that as we read forward. That's very important. God said, Judah, I will deliver the land into his hand. Verse 3, then Judah said to Simeon his brother, come up with me into the territory allotted me, that we may fight against the Canaanites, and I in turn will go with you into the territory allotted you. So Simeon went with him. Does anybody remember a time when somebody tried to help God do what God said he would do? God could have said, I want to send you, Judah, and Simeon. God could have said, I'll send Simeon. God could have said, I'll send all 12 tribes. But he didn't say that. He said, I will send Judah, and I will deliver the land into Judah's hands. Now, why did Judah ask for Simeon? You know, if you have 100,000 fighting men in your tribe, and Simeon has 100,000, that's 200,000. Makes it like easy work. But we've seen time and time again when God said, I'm not going to send all of you. I can do it with 300. I can do it with those that just lap up water like a dog. So for Judah to help God, right now, I don't know if it's a good thing or a bad thing, but I know for us, when God tells us to do something and how to do it, and we say, hey, Sarah, we need your help. Let's do something to help God do what he said he would do. So that didn't work out too good for Sarah. Not you. But you all know what I'm talking about, right? Okay, Sarah and Abraham. Okay, verse 4. So Judah went up, and Yahweh gave the Canaanites and the Perizzites into his hands, and they struck down 10,000 men at Bezek. Then they found Adonai-Bezek, Adonai just means Lord, Bezek in Bezek, and fought against him. And they struck down the Canaanites and the Perizzites. But Adonai-Bezek fled, and they pursued him and seized him and cut off his thumbs and big toes. Some versions say cut off his hands and feet. Why is that important? All in all, it's just a sign that they took out the leader. You cut off your feet, you cannot lead. They cut off his hands or his thumbs. He can't hold a sword. He can't hold a bow. He can't hold a spear. So basically, they cut off the leader. He's no longer a leader. If they had killed him, they would have killed him as a martyr. The people could have rallied around him. But now they hold him up and they say, see, this is what we do to your leader. There's nothing you can do about it. But Adonai-Bezek fled. 6, we're at 7. And Adonai-Bezek said, 70 kings with their thumbs and their big toes cut off used to gather up scraps under my table, as I have done, so God has repaid me. So they brought him to Jerusalem, and he died there. So basically what he's saying, and I don't know which God he's referring to, God has repaid me. He was not a believer, he was not an Israelite, but he believes that as he has done to others, then so it was done unto him. Verse 8, then the sons of Judah fought against Jerusalem and captured it, and struck it with the edge of the sword, and set the city on fire. And afterward, the sons of Judah went down to fight against the Canaanites, living in the hill country, and in the Negev, and in the Shephelah. Now we see that Judah's doing what God called him to do. We don't see Simeon show up yet, but God called him to go to subdue the land, and he's doing it. We'll see Simeon show up later. And afterward the sons of Judah went down to fight against the Canaanites living in the hill country, and in the Negev, and in the Shephelah. So Judah went against the Canaanites who lived in Hebron. Hebron's going to show up again later. Now the name of Hebron formerly was Kiriath Arba. Kiriath simply means city of, and Arba was the patriarch of the Nephilim, the clan of the Nephilims. He was the father of Anak. And Anak, as we'll finish in this verse, is the father of Shishai, Ahiman, and Talmai. So going back to verse 10, so Judah went against the Canaanites who lived in Hebron. Now the name of Hebron formerly was Kiriath Arba, and they struck Shishai, Ahiman, and Talmai. Now this shows up because about 40 years ago, when they first got to the land, Joshua and Caleb went to go spy out the land. these are the giants that they saw. So when they saw the giants, and they came back with a good report, and they said, we can do this. But the other 10 tribes said, no, we can't do this. We're afraid. So the picture that I get out of this is it took about 45 years for them to do what God said he was going to help them do. So my question for you is, how many years is it going to take for you to do what God promised you, or to do what God told you that you could do? I know for my life, I see this pattern over and over where I'm fighting the same thing over and over and over again. Sometimes it's fear. Sometimes it's a lack of faith. Sometimes I can't see the end of the road that I started on that God said, hey, this is for you. A lot of times we see a lot of things in our way. We see giants. My question to you is, what are your giants that you have to fight, that you're going to wait for? How many years are you going to wait to fight the giants that God said he's already conquered and delivered for you? Some of us are on the way down. We have more years behind us than we have in front of us. So we don't have a lot of years to conquer our giants. But for you younger people, there's the book of Judges, I think, is extremely important, especially for younger people, when we look at the giants in our lives. And we're going to see chariots. And we're going to ask ourselves, and I encourage you to ask yourselves, if God has something for me, if I'm a servant of Yahweh, and he says that this life is for me, how often am I going to run from what he has promised me? How often am I going to be in fear of those things that are set before me, whether it's bills, a bully, a job, lack of home, whatever it is? God wants us to step out in faith and to do what he called us to do and not be afraid of the giants, not be afraid of the chariots. As we're going to see later, fear is built into a lot of things. And if we had faith, if we had trust, we can still have fear, but that wouldn't stop us. Fear stops us when we have a lack of faith and we have a lack of trust. Verse 11. Then from there, he went against the inhabitants of Debir. Now the name of Debir formerly was Kiriath-Sepher. Kiriath, again, is the city of, and Sepher is letters or words. So I couldn't find much on that, so I'm thinking that it was probably a city with a library. Verse 12, and Caleb said, the one who strikes Kiriath-Sepher and captures it, I will give him my daughter Achsah as a wife. Now, I'm wondering how wonderful this woman was that somebody would be willing to go to war for her. And again, a lot of what I'm going to talk about, hopefully, is directed at young people to help you plan and direct your lives. So for the young women, I would ask, do you live a life such that someone would be willing to go to war for you? Not necessarily war as in I joined the army, but to do battle on your behalf. Are you someone that someone would look at you and say, I'm willing to go to battle on your behalf? And for the young men, are you such a man that a woman would want you to go to war for her, to go to battle for her, that she would be your prize, that she would want you, even if you won her? So I would encourage you to think about how you live your lives in order to be the person that someone would step forward for you. Then Othniel, verse 13, then Othniel, the son of Kenaz, Caleb's younger brother, captured it. So he gave his daughter Achash as a wife. Now Othniel, Caleb and Othniel are both from the tribe of Judah. Going back to verse 2, Judah shall go up. So we see some conquering going on because Judah's involved in all of these. Verse 14, now it happened that when she came to him, she enticed him to ask her father for the field. So the father promised a field for whoever went to war and captured Debir. Othniel captured Debir. He got Achsah as his wife, and they got some land. Now, as we read on, she goes to her husband and she says, go ask my father for some water, because the land that we have is dry, it's barren. And so the picture here is that it's an incomplete blessing. If God promises you a blessing and you see that this blessing is not really a blessing because, then we are to ask for more. We're to ask for the completeness of those things that he's promised us. And she said to him, give me a blessing since you have given me the land of the Negev. So you shall give me also springs of water. So Caleb gave her the upper springs and the lower springs. And I think about if my daughters come to me and they say, hey, Dad, can you give me whatever? And I give it to them. And not that she or they would be ungrateful, but if it doesn't serve the purpose for which they ask for it, they would come ask for more. And as a loving father, I would give them more. So as a loving father, he would give us our heart's desire as long as it meets with his will for us. Then Judah went, 16. Now the sons of the Kenite, Moses' father-in-law, went up from the city of palms, which was Jericho, with the sons of Judah to the wilderness of Judah, which is in the south of Arad, and they went and lived with the people. That's a problem. Deuteronomy 7. Where is it? Deuteronomy 7, 1 and 2 says, when Yahweh your God brings you into the land where you are entering to possess it, and he clears away many nations before you, the Hittites, the Girgasites, Amorites, Canaanites, Perizzites, Hivites, and Jebusites, 7 nations more numerous and stronger than you. And when Yahweh your God gives them over before you, and you strike them down, then you shall devote them to destruction. You shall cut no covenant with them and show no favor to them. So he told them back in Deuteronomy before they got to the land, don't live with them, don't marry them, don't spend any time with them, wipe them out. But here we have Judah. Now Judah was told to go up and clean out the land. I have given the land into his hand. Verse 2. Judah went with Simeon. The city of palms with the sons of Judah. The city of palms is Jericho. They had already wiped out Jericho. Jericho was not rebuilt where it was, but there was a city built right next to it. And Moses' father-in-law and Judah went to go live with them, in direct contrast to what Yahweh had told them to do. Verse 17, then Judah went with Simeon his brother, and they struck the Canaanites living in Zephath and devoted it to destruction. So the name of the city was called Hormah. Going back to 16, everything in here, when I read this, everything in here is 2,000 years old, 2,500 years old, but it's for us today. For those of us who hear Yahweh, for those of us who pray and we feel him, and when I say we, I don't mean me. It's very hard for me to hear him. But if you know what Yahweh's plan is for you, and he encourages you and tells you and holds something out for you and says, this is for you, but this is how you have to do it. This is how you attain it. This is how I'm going to give it to you. And you say, yeah, but I'm going to do it my way. Well, we're going to see what happens when you do it your way. We're going to see what you don't get. And we're going to see how you end up in this cycle that's all about the book of Judges. There's a cycle, and it goes over and over and over and over again. And it's part of the giants that we see in our lives, and the chariots that we see in our lives, and the cycle that we repeat over and over and over again, the struggles that we have in our lives that we can't overcome. It's partly because of us. Well, I'd say it's all because of us, because later we're going to see how God puts stumbling blocks in their way, and he punishes them for their disobedience. So a lot of times when we see things in our lives and we go, how come I can't get past this? It's not because God isn't doing what he said he would do. It's because we're not in a place where we're supposed to be. God cannot be in the presence of sin. So as we read this, if we think about all the ites as sins, the Girgasites, the Perizzites, the Hittites, if we think of each one of them as sins, and as we read through this and we go, oh, they're living with sin, they're living with sin, they're living with sin, they're living with sin. And we think about the sins in our lives and we go, I'm living with sin. God can't do what he said he would do. Oh, I adopted sin. God can't do it. Oh, it's just this time. I'll pray and I'll ask for forgiveness. I'll repent later. And he sees that and he goes, you're coming to me like this, holding sin in your hand, and I can't do anything with you because I can't be in the presence of sin. So when we read this, and we read all these ites, and they're living with the ites, and we see this cycle over and over again, and we go, well, how come? God says that he will never leave us, he will never forsake us, he would never break his covenant with us, but we do it all the time. And we expect him to do what he said he would do while we're going to him like this, with sin in our hand. And he's going, I can't. I can't even look at you. You got to get rid of that. Well, Lord, I don't know how to get rid of that. Well, you put it down. I was talking to a young man earlier this week who's getting married, and he asked me to pray for him because he has, he's dealing with pornography. And I said, well, have you prayed about it? He said, yeah. And I said, have you asked other people to pray about it? He said, yeah. I said, have you gotten rid of your smartphone? He goes, I said, have you, put blocks on your computer? So he's not doing what he needs to do in order to step away from it for God to do what he needs to do. So when we think about the different things that we can't overcome, that we're not willing to step out and do, and we expect God to just take it from us and we're not willing to do it, he's going, put it down first. Don't come to me like this. Put it down so I can do what I said I would do. He will never break his covenant with us. And if he can't, then we go, so you said you wouldn't break your covenant with us, but you're not doing what you said you would do. And he's going, I'm still holding up my part of the bargain. You're not the one holding up your part of the bargain. I get lost a lot. Okay. 18. Let's see. Okay. Go back to 17. Okay, so now we're getting into Philistine cities, verse 17. Then Judah went with Simeon his brother, and they struck the Canaanites living in Zephath and devoted it to destruction. Sounds good. So the name of the city was called Hormah. 18. And Judah captured Gaza with its territory, and Ashkelon with its territory, and Ekron with its territory. Now we're going to see a big giant shift. Verse 19. Now Yahweh was with Judah, and they took possession of the hill country. This is verse 2. And Yahweh said, Judah shall go up. Behold, I have given the land into his hand. So, back to verse 19. Yahweh was with Judah, just as he said he would, and they took possession of the hill country, but they could not dispossess the inhabitants of the valley because they had iron chariots. Now, this reminds me of Matthew 5:17. Matthew 5:17, you got two parts of one verse. Yeshua says, I did not come to abolish the law or the prophets. Second part of that one sentence, I did not come to abolish them, but to fulfill them. So people will say, well, the law was done away with because he fulfilled it. Well, you can't contradict, or Yeshua can't contradict himself. God can't contradict himself. If he says, I didn't come to abolish the law, how can you say he came to abolish the law by fulfilling the law? You can't. So right here in verse 19, it says, Yahweh was with Judah, and they took possession of the hill country. Go back to verse 2. And Yahweh said, Judah shall go up. Behold, I have given the land into his hand. Second part of verse 19. But they could not dispossess the inhabitants of the valley because they had iron chariots. Now remember, this is the generation of people who didn't see the crossing of the Red Sea. They didn't see the chariots falling into the water. They didn't see the miracles that God had performed on their behalf. So when they saw the iron chariots, and when we think of Judah, we're thinking of the tribe. The man Judah is gone. This generation did not see the miracles. So was it that they could not dispossess the inhabitants of the valley? No, it's not that they could not. They would not. Why would they not do it? Because they were afraid. They had a lack of faith. They had a lack of trust. Now, when we go back to verse 8, the sons of Judah fought against Jerusalem and captured it and struck it with the edge of the sword and set the city on fire. Verse 10. So Judah went against the Canaanites who lived in Hebron. Now the name of Hebron formerly was Kiriath Arba, where the giants lived. So they conquered the giants that they couldn't conquer 40 years ago. But then they come up against chariots, And God wiped the chariots out. But they were not aware of that. So if we go to Joshua 17:8, let's see. Joshua 17 and 18. Then Joshua spoke to the house of Joseph, to Ephraim and Manasseh, saying, you are a numerous people and have great power. You shall not have one lot only, but the hill country shall be yours, for though it is a forest, you shall clear it, and to its farthest borders it shall be yours, for you shall dispossess the Canaanites, even though they have chariots of iron, and even though they are strong. So God had spoke to them and told them what they were going to come up against. He told them that you were going to go up against chariots of iron. He told them that you would dispossess them. He told them that I got you. But they were full of fear. They had a lack of faith. They had a lack of trust. Now, this is the first time that we see a turn. Up until this point, Judah was going in and he was dispossessing the people and he was conquering the land and he was doing everything that God told him to do. But I didn't think about this till just now, but when we go back to 16, the sons of the Kenite, Moses' father-in-law, went up from the city of palms with the sons of Judah into the wilderness of Judah, which is in the south of Arid, and they went and lived with the people. That's the first open disobedience that I see in this passage, and that may have been the turn. God repeats the promise in Deuteronomy 20:1 and 2 about you're going to go up against chariots, but not to worry about it. So verse 20, then they gave Hebron to Caleb as Moses had promised back in Numbers 14:24 and Deuteronomy 1:36. And so if we go back to, let's see, where's that? Verse 8, the sons of Judah fought against Jerusalem and captured it and struck it with the edge of the sword and set the city on fire. And afterward the sons of Judah went down to fight against the Canaanites living in the hill country, Negev and Shephelah. So that's where they had captured the city, but it's not given to them until we get down to here, verse 21. Verse 22 through 25. Likewise, the house of Joseph went up against Bethel, and Yahweh was with them. So we have to always pay attention to Yahweh was with them, and we see how that turns out. And the house of Joseph spied out Bethel. Now the name of the city was formerly Luz. Then the spies saw a man coming out of the city, and they said to him, please show us the entrance to the city, and we will treat you with loving kindness. So he showed them the entrance to the city, and they struck the city with the edge of the sword, but they let the man and all his family go free. Does that remind anybody of anything? Rahab? Now there's a difference between Rahab and here. The difference is when we go back to Deuteronomy 7. Deuteronomy 7:1 and 2. When Yahweh your God brings you into the land where you are entering to possess it, and he clears away many nations before you, the Hittites, the Girgashites, the Amorites, the Canaanites, Perizzites, Hivites, Jebusites, 7 nations more numerous and stronger than you. And when Yahweh your God gives them over before you, and you shall cut no covenant with them and show no favor to them. So when they said, we will treat you with loving kindness. So he showed them the entrance to the city, and they struck the city with the edge of the sword, but they let the man and all his family go free. So the man went into the land of the Hittites and built a city and named it Luz, which is the name to this day. And to this day, it is not Luz. 26. It's a Palestinian city today, and it is called Beit El. It's a Palestinian city, a Palestinian stronghold that they were using when they were at war with Israel. So now as we get into 27, I'm going to speed through and then go back because there's a picture that I want to paint. Verse 27, but Manasseh did not take possession of Beth-shean. 29, Ephraim did not dispossess the Canaanites. 30, Zebulun did not dispossess the inhabitants of Kitron. 31, Asher did not dispossess the inhabitants of Acco. 33, Naphtali did not dispossess the inhabitants of Beth Shemesh. So in the beginning, and here's what I see. God said he delivered the land into the hand of who? Judah. Judah's not in any of these. Judah did not go and do what Judah was told to do. So when we leave somebody else to do what God gave us to do, there's disaster built into that. Now, had Judah gone to do it, if he did everything that God told him to do, going back to where he went to Jericho, the city of palms with the Kenites, God told him not to do that. He didn't dispossess the chariots in the lowland countries. He had a lack of faith. And then he doesn't go to the territories with his brothers to conquer the land that they were supposed to conquer. So now reading through 27. But Manasseh did not take possession of Beth-shean and its towns, or Tanakh and its towns, or the inhabitants of Dor and its towns, or the inhabitants of Ibleam and its towns, or the inhabitants of Megiddo and its towns. So the Canaanites persisted to live in that land. As we continue to read this and we ask ourselves, why is Israel in the trouble that it's in today? And you go back thousands of years and you see this pattern over and over and over again. And it's not Israel I'm talking about, it's you that I'm talking about, it's me that I'm talking about, it's our jobs, it's our houses, it's our kids, it's our cousins, it's our relatives. It's everything that gets in our way that prevents us from being in a close and tight relationship with Yah. It's everything that says, hey, I'm going to do it my way. And God, I expect you to bless it. The way I used to explain it to my kids was, I would say, imagine God's covering, and our obedience is like an umbrella, and you're in a storm. And all of the rain is all of the stuff that Satan has for us. And we step out from under that covering because, not because we want to get wet, but because we think we can stay dry on our own. And we get hit by rain after rain after rain after rain. Next thing you know, we're soaked and we're on the ground crying because, God's not coming through for us. And we wonder, how can we get back under there? And we're so beat down that we think we can't, but his umbrella is big. We can get back under there. We just have to put down our sin. We have to put down the things that we hold on to that God doesn't want us to have in order to have the blessings that he wants us to have. And being dry is a blessing. Being wet and soaked is not a blessing, because when you get beat up and you get beat down, you don't feel like you can get back up until somebody says, hey, let me help you up. And that somebody is Yah. And he sends help in the form of people. He sends help in the form of TV shows and movies and a word. But this is where Psalms 121 says, where does my help come from? My help comes from the Lord. No, that's not Psalm 121. Yes, it is. Maker of heaven and earth. Anyway, let's see. All right, I was in the middle of all these guys. 27 through 33, they failed miserably. Ephraim did not dispossess the Canaanites who were living in Zebulun, who were living in Gezer, so the Canaanites lived in Gezer among them. Zebulun did not dispossess the inhabitants of Kitron or the inhabitants of Nahalal, so the Canaanites lived among them and became subject to forced labor. Oh, let me go back to 28. I didn't read that one. And it happened when Israel became strong that they put the Canaanites to forced labor, but they did not dispossess them completely. So here we have, this is just the way I say it, they took another left. Not only did they not dispossess them, not only did they live amongst them, but they said, okay, you know what? If we let them live, then we can use them for forced labor, slave labor. God won't mind that. He won't mind, because now we don't have to work so hard. We can put them to work. But God said to get rid of them. They didn't do it. They found every way to not do what God said to do. 31. Asher did not dispossess the inhabitants of Acco, or the inhabitants of Sidon, or Alab, or Akzib, or of Helbah, or Aphik, or of Rehob. 32. So the Asherites lived among the Canaanites, the inhabitants of the land, for they did not dispossess them. 33. Naphtali did not dispossess the inhabitants of Beth Shemesh, or the inhabitants of Beth Anath, but lived among the Canaanites, the inhabitants of the land, and the inhabitants of Beth Shemesh and Beth Anath became forced labor for them. See, they have this new thing. You know, we're not going to do what God said to do, but we'll make up for it because we'll put you to work. 34. Now, they took a left. Judah took a left. He didn't do what he said he was going to do. These guys go out, and they're doing what God told somebody else to do. Oh, that's another lesson in that. If you're trying to pick up the mantle that God has for somebody else, and it's not your mantle, and it's not for you to do, and you say, okay, well, God said for them to do it, that'll work for me. 27 through 33 says to me, that's not going to work out. Verse 34, the Amorites pressed the sons of Dan. Now, this is a left. This is a U-turn. The Amorites pressed the sons of Dan into the hill country, for they did not allow them to come down to the valley. So this is the first time that we see that some Israelites were not only in a skirmish, lived among them, put them to forced labor, but they got pushed out of their land. Now, when we go to Revelation and we look at the 144,000, Dan is not there. This could be a reason. You know, Dan said, I got pushed out of the land. There's no reason. I'm sorry, not that there's no reason, but I got pushed out of the land. Then when we look at Jeroboam and they set up a temple of worship in the land of Dan, that could be another reason. I could not find definitively a reason why Dan is not listed in Revelation in the 144,000, 12,000 from each tribe. But these are the two examples that I can find of Dan's grievous, atrocious acts against God. This is the only tribe listed that got pushed out of the land. And maybe because of that, because they were so weak and as a tribe, not faithful, that they allowed a temple to be placed in their borders. 35, and the Amorites persisted in living in Mount Heres, in Aijalon, and in Shalbin, but the hand of the house of Joseph became heavy, and they became forced labor. Now the border of the Amorites ran from the ascent of Akrabim from Selah and upwards. Okay, that's chapter 1. Anybody have any questions, comments?
Hi, this is Eli. Just something that you had said was very insightful, and it got me thinking about asking Yahweh for help with their hands out and with sin being in them. And it made me think of, the Israelites probably thought that they had a really good deal. They had a bunch of these giants, and they had a lot of free labor. And so they were thinking about how they were going to get whatever the plan was done themselves, not thinking about how Yahweh cannot be, how sin defiles the land itself. And these are all people who the land has vomited out, and that's from Leviticus 18:25. And so Yahweh wants them to expel these people because they're literally sinful in the land. He has to clear out the land so he could be present. And them thinking that they're getting something good out of it with the forced labor and a shortcut of not having to do probably a very terrible deed, even just pushing him out of the land, they're not seeing it from Yahweh's perspective and what he needs us to do and why he asks us to do what we do. And your comments about that was really insightful and got me thinking about that and trying to see our lives through the eyes of Yahweh.
I'm Lindsay. Something that stood out to me was in verses 22 through 26, and it's introducing the spies that are going into the city. So, and they come upon the man that's going out of the city, and the man going out helps them, and it allows them to conquer the city. And it made me think of, like you said, Victor, the story of Rahab, but almost like a contrast. So in the story of Rahab, the spies go in, Rahab helps the spies, it allows the Israelites to conquer the city. And from that, Rahab is saved physically, and her family, physically and spiritually, because she becomes grafted in to the family, into Yah's family. Then there's this contrast story where this man is saved by helping them, but he does not choose to get grafted in. He chooses to flee or to leave and go start his own. And so I was talking about it with the boys, and Case was asking me, what were you reading about, Mom? And I said, well, there's this thing, and I just don't get it. He's like, oh, it's choice. And I was like, yes, that's it. It's that simpleness of choice. Like Yahweh gives us. This man had a choice to be thankful and praise the God and to choose to get grafted in, but he chose not to. And then I was looking up the name of Luz, and the first kind of thing that comes is almond tree, or this almond branch. But then as I dug a little bit deeper, it was interesting because it could also mean to turn aside or to twist away or to bend. And so this man, not only does he decide to leave and go out into the pagan land, but he names that city to turning aside and turning away. So it's just an interesting picture to come from that.
I'm Jacob. So yeah, the thing that caught my eye with that incident too was Bet El means house of God. So we have to ask ourselves, well, why is this location important? This is where Jacob was leaving from his father's house, and this is where God meets him, and he sees the stairway. And it's Jacob that actually changes the name from Luz, or turning aside, or almond tree, to house of God. So this is a significant location because what's happening here is that this is a site of promise. And rather than cleave to the God of Israel and obey him, which is exactly what the promise is that Jacob says, if you will be my God, then I'll follow you. If you bring me into the land, I'll do what you tell me to do. And so the horrible irony of this situation in Judges is that in contrast with their father Jacob, what they're doing is now they're in the land, receive the promise, and they're disobeying. And they're allowing these people to intermingle with them and sin against them. So it's a really tragic location because this is where a promise was made, and it's where a promise is broken by his descendants.
Desiree, I just wanted, I guess, to share that, this past week I was speaking with my cousin who made a business move. And I had said to her, this is something y'all put on your heart for years, and you finally do it, and it's successful. And I said, imagine just where we would be if we had listened to him the first time. And this book of Judges kind of reminds me of that, of how if we would just be obedient, if he gave us his word on something, no matter what it looks like, a lot of the time what keeps us from jumping or doing whatever it is Yah told us to do, or meeting him wherever we need to meet him to receive the reward or the promise, it is fear. And fear becomes an idol in that way. Fear shouldn't be stopping you from doing what you need to do. But you do see that here with y'all's people out of fear. And then also what kind of Jacob actually just made me think of it. You know, a lot of the churches in today's world generation, it's the intermingling of people that have been drafted in and y'all's people, and then people who just choose to be disobedient. So a lot of the churches aren't being led or seeing what y'all can do, because there's all that intermingling and wanting to compromise, wanting to mix up what feels good, the fleshly, worldly things that feels good, even in the Christian sense, quote unquote, with the word. It just doesn't mix well. You can't mix scripture. You can't mix what Yah has promised us, covenant, what comes with that, the statutes and judgments, commandments with the world. And this is what you get when that happens. And it goes generation and generation and generation. 4 generations are cursed when we aren't obedient. So I just wanted to share that.
And I think responding to the first part of what you said, fear, I think also sometimes there's a phrase, paralysis of analysis. You know, if God calls us to do something, well, how do I do that? How do I do that? You know, a lot of us wait for God to say, first thing you need to do is get dressed. Then you need to go out the house. Then you need to go. And then if God says, I'm going to give you a job and you're going to make more money, but you don't fill out any applications, you don't turn in any resumes, then you're going to be sitting there saying, God didn't do what he said he would do. He promised me a job. And so sometimes we just have to get out and, let's see, what's the phrase? Step out in faith. You just have to say, well, I don't know what I'm doing, but God, direct my steps. You promised me a job. I'm going to apply here. I'm going to apply until somebody responds at the door that you open for me. You know, my prayer all the time is, you know, when I'm doing stuff like that is, Lord, close the doors where you don't want me and open them where you do. And then I take the shotgun approach. I just do whatever, and I trust Yah that he's going to say, no, she's not going to respond. She's not going to respond. He's not going to respond. She's going to respond. And that's where I'm supposed to be. But a lot of times we just go, okay, what do I do? I don't know what I'm going to do. You know, just as an example, if you're sure that God promised you a job, start putting out resumes. If you're sure that God said you're going to have a house one day, clean up your credit. If you're sure that God said you're going to be married one day, fix your life so that you become somebody who's marriageable. Is that right? Marriageable? Okay. Able to be married, marriageable. Make sure that you're somebody that somebody would want to marry. So don't just sit there and wait for God to do what he said he would do. We're responsible for doing our part. God will open doors where he wants you. I had a pastor friend said that one time, he said, he was in error. He said, if God closes a door, he opens a window. He wants you to climb through a window. And I'm like, if God closes a door, he don't want you going in there. You're going to go through like a thief, you know? No, if the door is closed, the door is closed. Don't try to beat down doors that God has closed. You know, what are you doing in here? Oh, God said I could come in. Okay, why are you climbing through the window? Why'd you break down the back door? You know, God's going to have a door wide open and somebody's going to say, welcome, come on in. Just like Yeshua's house, welcome, come on in. So, anybody else? Michael? Oh, I'm sorry, she has the mic.
Well, when you just said that, it's a little piece I'll say, and then there was a question I had. But when I was praying once and I was asking Father, I'm like, why I've been praying.
You've never prayed again in your life?
I'll pray all the time.
Okay.
I used to hide when I was little and pray to God in corners, so honest to goodness.
Okay.
I know he was, but I talked to him anyway. But anyway, I was praying for something that wasn't happening. And I said to him, what am I doing wrong? I mean, what do I need to change in order to hear from you so I know what I'm supposed to do? Because I want to obey you, but maybe I'm not, and I'm fooling myself. So please show me. And he spoke to my heart, and he said, when you pray believing. You don't pray worrying. You don't pray, fretting or, oh, he's never going to, be negative. He's never going to answer me. When is he going to answer? And I lost my wallet in New York, and it had money in it that I needed. And I had to really pray like 5 times to stop worrying. And when I finally did, the next day I found it. So he made it very clear. It's like, when you come to me, just come believing. Just believe. Don't worry, And that has worked for me. Sometimes you have to step away and remind yourself, but then I was at peace. When I got at peace is when I got the prayer answered. So then anyway, moving forward, the question, I read all those verses with you in Judges where everyone just ignored what God told them to do, and they let the people, and some of the verses said to this day. So why do you think, after your study, why do you feel that those people just so recklessly and rudely and disrespectfully ignored God? I mean, didn't he get to see, they got to see him sometimes. It's not like, I'm just curious about that. Because, I think us here, we have Holy Spirit, of course, but I think that it helps us to, more than probably what they had, because they had nobody, no Holy Spirit in them. But I was just curious what your thoughts were on that.
I think that generation, excuse me, that generation didn't know him. Like I said, it was the 3rd generation after Moses. And I believe it's in Deuteronomy where they were commanded to read the Torah every 7 years. And so I don't believe they did that, because otherwise they would have known the stories. They would have known what Yah has done in their lives. And by them not doing that, we can see how far away they were from obeying him. They don't have a leader. Now, when they had Moses, Moses said, do this, do this, do this, do this. And they did it because they saw Yah talking to him. When they had Joshua, they had somebody in front of them saying, do this, do this, do this, do this, don't do that. This is the way of Yah. That's the way of Yah. That's the way of the pagan. They didn't have that. They went to Yah in the beginning of chapter 1, and they said, but their question was, who do you want to go up? Maybe it was out of fear. I don't want to go. Who do you want to go? Maybe they wanted pride to be able to say, my tribe conquered the land. But that's all they asked. And then they partially did what he called them to do, and then didn't do what he called them to do. So I just think that they did not know him. Oh, I'm sorry, Michael.
Let me just, if I can, get inspired from what Yaakov said to what you were talking about, Victor, and talk about lose for just a second. Because if we go back there, it actually answers the question, Wendy, that I think that you just asked. The book of Judges is about doing what's right in our own eyes, as opposed to waiting and listening to what God does. But that hasn't stopped. We always seem to lean on our own understanding as opposed to what God is speaking out. And in Luz, as Yaakov just pointed out, we have Yaakov in Jacob's ladder seeing God at the head of this ladder and the angels going to and fro and Beit El. But it's also to this day known as the city of Luz, to this day. So what does that mean? Well, Luz is also, very interesting in Hebrew, an indestructible bone required for the resurrection. Okay, so if we look at that word, what we have here is God's promise right from the very beginning that we're going to have this resurrection possibility. But what do? Oh, we've got to preserve that bone, because if I don't have that bone, if I'm buried and something happens to that bone, or if I'm cremated or fire takes me, I don't get resurrected. So again, thinking in our own mind rather than understanding that the principle of resurrection that Yaakov had at that moment in time doesn't require something physical to manifest itself, to be able to enjoy the promise of the Lord in eternal life. So again, it's something so basic as the naming of the city pointed out so specifically here, so that we can understand a principle, which is, hey, there's a name of a city that Yaakov was told to call it, this location. But what do we do in our own eyes? Oh, we're going to call it Luz. and we're going to call it this way because we know better, and we know the way it should be. And to this day, that is what we fight with, because even with Yeshua coming and teaching us what is right, to look at the takanot, the changing of the law of Moses, which is where we're seeing this whole story come forth and not following that through. And Jesus is absolutely, every single miracle that he's giving us is to show us why we need to do exactly the commandments and be in emunah, be in faithful obedience by action to what we're supposed to do. And yet, we don't do that. But that's how we need to come back. So I just want to make that comment. Thank you.
I just want to read something before the next person. So, the first sentence of chapter 1, verse 1, now it happened after the death of Joshua that the sons of Israel asked of Yahweh, saying, who shall go up first for us against the Canaanites to fight against them? And this is in response to what Michael said. And the last verse of Judges, so that was the first verse of Judges. You can't hear me? Okay, that was the first verse of chapter 1. Chapter 1, first verse. The very last verse of Judges. That was the first verse of Judges. This is the last verse. In those days, there was no king in Israel. Everyone did what was right in his own eyes. So if you think about those being bookmarks, or not bookmarks, but bookends to the book of Judges, they start off asking Yah what to do, and it ends with they were all doing what was right in their own eyes. So every time we make an excuse about what we do, and every time we say, okay, I'll ask for forgiveness later, I will repent, I'll do this, and I'm going to be honest, I've done stuff that I've known that I shouldn't do, knowing that I shouldn't do it when I did it, but I wasn't thinking in terms of, well, I'm going to do it and I'm going to ask for forgiveness. I was just like, okay, no, I'm not going to do it, I'm going to do it. But that's doing what's right in your own eyes. And when you do what's right in your own eyes, there is no blessing that comes from it, no blessing. And there's no point or reason to even ask, why am I not being blessed, if you know that you step out from under the umbrella. What's the point? God, how come I'm not being blessed? How come because you have hate in your heart, because you have unforgiveness, because you have lust in your eyes, you have whatever it is. We get selfish and we go, God, how could, it's about me. Well, everything about God is about God. Everything. There's nothing about us. We are a byproduct of who he is, what he is, why he is, what he has, who he has. We're a byproduct of that. Everything about him is about him. Okay, anybody else?
Okay, my question is, it looks to me that there's some tribes missing in this portion. So I don't see reference to Reuben or Issachar or Gad or the Levites. The Levites make sense to me because they don't necessarily have their own territory and their own land. So then I thought, well, maybe it's the ones that are on the other side of the Jordan, the east side of the Jordan. But from what I can tell, Issachar would not have had territory on the east side of the Jordan. So does anyone know, maybe why they're not mentioned? Maybe they did dispossess as they should have, or why isn't Reuben, Issachar, or Gad? Oh, okay.
All right, anybody else? Okay, Michael.
I'm just going to emphasize one more thing here. In chapter 3, in verse 16, or just before that, 15, where Ehud, the son of Gera, is risen up as a deliverer. And even when we do all these terrible things, God has got a plan, and he's going to help us. So our prayers are answered. That's the big thing here. And he's going to make a present to Eglon, this big fat guy. And what's interesting is that, again, he makes Ehud makes a dagger which has 2 edges a cubit in length. Well, what's something else that harkens? Where have we heard the 2-edged sword or dagger? It comes out of our Yeshua's mouth. And what is God doing? He's saying, okay, I'm going to actually place a physical dagger, the 2-edged sword, right here in Ehud's hand, so you can't not see what I'm about to do. And in the fatness of this man, that dagger disappears. And what comes out of it? Filth. It says right here, as we continue on, he brought the present. Eglon's a very fat man. And as he offers the present, sends away everyone else. Well, what comes in? The dagger actually disappears into this fat man's belly. And what comes out is dirt. So it's absolutely incredible to us, the visualization to me of what this whole story is reflecting to.
Okay, last one. Anybody before we move on? We still have 2 more chapters. Okay. Going to chapter 2. Okay, chapter 2, verse 1. Then the angel of Yahweh came up from Gilgal to Bochum. And he said, I brought you out of Egypt and led you into the land which I have sworn to your fathers. And I said, I will never break my covenant with you. And as for you, you shall cut no covenant with the inhabitants of this land. You shall tear down their altars, but you have not listened to my voice. What is this you have done? Okay, so verse 1 says that there was an angel speaking. Does anybody think it was an angel? Yeah, because he says, I brought you up out of the land. I led you into the land which I have sworn to your fathers. I said, I will never break my covenant. Angels don't make covenants. And as for you, you shall cut no covenant with the inhabitants of this land. You shall tear down their altars, but you have not listened to my voice. What is this you have done? Verse 3, therefore, I also said, I will not drive them out before you, but they will become as thorns in your sides, and their gods will become a snare to you. So if we go back to Numbers 33:55, it says, but if you do not dispossess the inhabitants of the land from before you, then it will be that those whom you let remain of them will become as pricks in your eyes and as thorns in your sides. And they will trouble you in the land which you inhabit. And it will be as I plan to do to them, so I will do to you. So again, going back to what we were saying earlier, if we don't do what God says for us to do, we are not our own enemies. Sometimes, in order to discipline us, God will send something, someone, in order to discipline us, in order to bring us back. So it happened that when the angel of Yahweh spoke these words to all the sons of Israel, the people lifted up their voice and wept. So they named that place Bochum, which means weeping, or the place of weeps, and there they sacrificed to Yahweh. So now we're going to get into seeing this pattern. So they get into the land, they get beat down, they're going to go into bondage, for lack of a better word right now, and then they're going to cry out. Then God's going to send a judge, and judge not in the sense like we think of a judge, but a deliverer, someone who's a regional deliverer, not for the entire land, but for the different regions. Wherever he raises up a judge, they've been beat down, they're in bondage, and then he delivers them. And then we're going to see at the end of Deuteronomy 34, the Song of Moses. In the Song of Moses, he talks about how I carry you, I take care of you, you get lazy, fat, and happy, then you sin, then you go into bondage, then you cry out to me, and then I deliver you. So he tells them this in Deuteronomy that this is going to happen, and it plays out in Judges, and we're going to start seeing that starting in chapter 2. Let's see, chapter 2, verse 6. Then Joshua sent the people away, And the sons of Israel went each to his inheritance to possess the land. And the people served. Now, I read this in the beginning when I first started, 6 through 10. And the people served Yahweh all the days of Joshua and all the days of the elders who survived Joshua, who saw all the great work of Yahweh which he had done for Israel. Then Joshua the son of Nun, the servant of Yahweh, died at the age of 110. And they buried him in the territory of his inheritance, in Timnath-Heres, in the hill country of Ephraim, north of Mount Gash. And all that generation also were gathered to their fathers, and there arose another generation after them who did not know Yahweh, or even the work which he had done for Israel. This makes me think about when I saw a statistic or a report some years ago about how there are a lot of believers who raise children in a righteous way in church, and they go away to college. And after they come back from college, they are the most liberal people you've ever met in your life. Because we say, here, read this. But we're not the greatest at saying, walk this way, walk in his ways. It doesn't get in here. So when they get to school and they're with liberal teachers and they say evolution and there's no proof for God, and they say lesbianism and there's no proof for gender, and they say all of the other things. And these kids, they go, oh, wait a minute, you're a professor. My parents don't know anything. Those are people just talking. They're just reading out of a book, but you're smart. And they come back home and they're as liberal as you can be, so much so that a lot of times you don't even want them in your house. I'm not talking about you. But we have to do a better job. We have to do a better job of getting it in them so that it cannot be snatched out of their hands. And a lot of times it's not even snatched out of their hands. They don't have the temerity, they don't have the wherewithal, they don't have the strength of character to say you're a liar and you're wrong and evolution is wrong and there's no proof. We don't equip them like that. We give them this and they read it, and then a lot of times they come home and we don't even live the way we tell them to live. We don't do what we tell them to do. We don't walk the way we tell them to walk, but we say, okay, I'm doing this, ignore it, I'm grown, you do what I tell you to do. But we don't equip them to be strong in the faith. We don't equip them to stand on firm foundation. We have to do a better job. And as we walk this walk, and as we have our young people come in and we go home and they see us in the world and they see us in public and they see how we stand against the world, that gives them the strength of character to do what we do, not what we say we're going to do, not what we tell them to do. But if they see us cheating, lying, stealing, they're going to go, oh, okay, so that's what you do. You say you walk this way, but you really walk that way. I think I shared some time ago, we had a friend years ago, many churches ago. She would play contemporary hip-hop, rap music on Sunday on her way to church. And she told me one day, she said, I asked her something. She was playing some worship music. And she said, oh, well, when I get a block from church, I change the station and I put on worship music. So her life was one thing, but when she was being looked at, it was something else. So she had 4 daughters. She had 2 daughters. Her daughters saw what her life was like. So, when she says, go out there and stand on firm foundation and show them the strength of your character, she goes, like you, Mom? You want me to be like you? Because that's the only example she has. That's the closest, best, strongest example she has. Our kids can come to church every Sabbath, and they can watch us be holy and pious on Sabbath, and then when they walk out, they go, there's no examples in my life. I'm not surrounded by anybody but them. At least they're not hypocrites. They sin, and they sin, and they sin, and they acknowledge that they sin, but here I'm a hypocrite. We have to do a better job. See, I forgot where I am. Let's see. Let's try 3. No. 7. And the people served Yahweh all the days of Joshua and all the days of the elders who survived Joshua, who saw all the great work of Yahweh, which he had done for Israel. Then Joshua the son of Nun, the servant of Yahweh, died. Ooh, I read all of that. Okay, jump to 11. Then the sons of Israel did what was evil in the eyes of Yahweh and served the Baals. Then the sons of Israel did what was evil in the eyes of Yahweh and served the Baals. And this is after Joshua died. They had no leader. They had no parent. They had nobody to say, this is right, that's wrong. And they forsook Yahweh, the God of their fathers, who had brought them out of the land of Egypt, and followed other gods from among the gods of the people who were around them, and bowed themselves down to them. Thus they provoked Yahweh to anger. 13. So they forsook Yahweh and served Baal and Ashtaroth. Now Ashtaroth is a fertility god, god of love, god of war, goddess of love, goddess of war. And if we go to Deuteronomy 7, 3 and 4, it says, okay. Furthermore, you shall not intermarry with them. You shall not give your daughters to their sons, nor shall you take their daughters for your sons. For they will turn your sons away from following me, and they will serve other gods. Then the anger of Yahweh will be kindled against you, and he will quickly destroy you. So when we see that they served Ashtaroth, the goddess of fertility, the goddess of love, that's a clear indication of what they're doing after following that god. 14, and the anger of Yahweh burned against Israel, and he gave them into the hands of plunderers who plundered them, and he sold them into the hands of their enemies around them, so that they could no longer stand before their enemies. Wherever they went, the hand of Yahweh was against them for evil, as Yahweh had spoken, and as Yahweh had sworn to them, so that they were severely distressed. And this goes back to the Song of Moses, where he had promised them at the end of Deuteronomy. This is what's going to happen. So now we see this cycle. First we had the giants, took 40 years to conquer the giants. Then they ran into the chariots, and they were afraid of the chariots. And then they disobeyed, and they lived among them, and they turned them into slaves, or what was it called? Servants. Turned them into servants. And now, so you see the progression. So they not only disobeyed and lived among them, and not only lived, well, they didn't completely wipe them out. So they left them there. They lived among them and said, well, since they're here, then let's turn them into slaves and to servants. And once they're into slaves and servants, now they have a chance to learn about their gods, and they have a chance to learn about how they worship, and they have a chance to learn about all the fun things in the world out there in Sacramento, in Elk Grove, in San Francisco. They have a chance because they're surrounded by all of this. So when we go out and we surround ourselves with the ites, and let's call the ites sin. When we surround ourselves with the sin and we think we can live amongst it, we can be in the middle of it, but we're not going to be a part of it, we're lying to ourselves. We're lying to ourselves. If there's 5 sinners out there and I'm in the middle of sinners, there's somebody, I think it was William Covey, who said, show me your friends and I'll tell you who you are. So if you're surrounded by that, nobody's going to believe, oh, you hang out with all pornography people, let's see, what do you call it? Pornography, but you don't do it. You hang out, all your friends are thieves, you go through stores and you steal, but you don't steal. Nobody's going to believe that. God doesn't believe that. And even if you don't now, if you continue, it's going to get in you. It's going to work its way into you. I had one of my son's friends came to live with us for a while, and he was out there. He was a good guy, but he was not a good guy. And we were talking about something about he believed it was okay to take. Now, he's living in my house. He's driving my car. He's eating our food. He's, sleeping in, my son's room. I took him in like a son. And we were having a conversation. I said, so I forgot how we get there, but I said, so if I left a $5 bill on the fireplace mantle, you think it's okay to take it? He said, yeah. And I said, wait, and I said, you're living in my house, eating my food, driving my car, I put gas in the car, I buy you clothes, and he was a college student. And he said, yeah. And I said, well, why do you think that's okay? He said, because I want it. But that's the life he came from. And we spoke, for the first 20, 30 minutes, I'm thinking he has to be messing with me. So I'm carrying this conversation. I'm like, come on, really? But I realized he was serious. And then when he started to describe his life, you know, how he bounced from here to there, here to there, and he was in group homes, and his house burnt down, and he had to survive. And so for him, survival meant getting what I need to get, doing what I need to do. So when we surround ourselves with that, we adopt that mentality. The sad thing is when people, well, let's make it a question. When people are around us, do they change into being more like us, or is it a struggle and we tell ourselves, well, we have to leave them because they're drawing me out, they're drawing me into them? We have to have, this has to be in us so deeply, ingrained in us so much, that either they leave or they turn into us. But that's not the case. A lot of times we go, you know, I can't hang out with you. You know, you're gonna drag me down. You know, you're getting into me. I'm starting to think different. If this isn't in us deep enough, strong enough, and not that we have to know, that man over there knows the word. I'm saying not that we have to know the text, the word, but the spirit of this. If this spirit of this is not in us, we're going to fall, and we're going to fall hard. And Scripture says in the last days, even if the elect, let's see, what does it say? Yeah. So how can that happen? It happens because we say we're the elect, but are we? We say that this is in us, but is it? When a spirit comes upon us, and I'm a man who believes in spirits, if a spirit, not the spirit, but if a spirit comes upon us, does it, and then turns around and runs away? Or say, okay, there's an in. Here's an in. I can get in. Okay, he's doing this. That's my open door. She's doing that. That's my open door. We have to have no open doors. Our little ones that come here with us, that watch us out in the world, they have to go, my dad is a solid man. My dad would not do that. Closest thing, I got two examples. When my oldest son, Michael, was really young, some guy came to me and said, your son was cussing at me. And he was a little guy. I said, no. No, he said this. I said, no, he didn't. No. I know my son. I know he wouldn't. Ooh, I got an even better one. My grandson. Somebody accused my grandson of doing something. My daughter went to him and said, hey, this person said this. She was jamming him up. She didn't ask him. She said, this person said this. I told him for the rest of my life, I will honor him for this. He said, you know me. That was his response. You know me. She stopped and said, it's a wrap. Cool, I do. You didn't do it. That was the end of that conversation. Anyway, I can go off on tangents, so I'm going to come back. All right, let's see, where were we? Anybody knows where we were? Let's try 12. 14, thank you. And the anger of Yahweh burned against Israel, and he gave them into the hands of plunderers who plundered them. And he sold them into the hands of their enemies around them, so that they could no longer stand before their enemies. I'm going to rush through this because Trevor really wants me to get to chapter 3 and talk about the fat man. Let's see. Wherever they went, the hand of Yahweh was against them for evil, as Yahweh had spoken and as Yahweh had sworn to them, so that they were severely distressed. 16. Then Yahweh raised up judges who saved them from the hands of those who plundered them. Again, we see this cycle. You know, they get plundered, they cry out, God saves them, he puts them in a place of comfort. They get fat and lazy, then they go right back to their old ways. Yet they did not listen to their judges either, for they played the harlot after other gods and bowed themselves down to them. They turned aside quickly from the way in which their fathers had walked in obeying the commandments of Yahweh. They did not do as their fathers. Now, when Yahweh raised up judges for them, Yahweh was with the judge and saved them from the hand of their enemies all the days of the judge. So as long as the judge was alive, Yahweh was with them, and he saved them from the hands of the judge. But then we see as the judge died, when the judge died, they go, oh, we don't have anybody to hold us accountable anymore. For Yahweh was moved to pity by their groanings because of those who oppressed and suppressed them. But it happened when the judge died that they would turn back and act more corruptly than their fathers. So this kind of reminds me of when you're growing up, and as long as your parents are watching you, you're doing what you're supposed to do. But then as soon as you get out of sight, you do what you want to do. I think the best compliment a parent can have is if somebody comes to you and tells you how wonderful your kids are when you have not been around. That tells you what kind of job you're doing as a parent. If they say good things, let me put it that. So the anger of Yahweh burned against Israel, and he said, because this nation has trespassed against my covenant, which I commanded their fathers, and has not listened to my voice, I also will no longer dispossess before them any of the nations which Joshua left when he died, in order to test Israel by them, whether they will keep the way of Yahweh to walk in it, as their fathers did or not. So Yahweh allowed those nations to rest, the nations that were dispossessing them, not dispossessing them quickly, and he did not give them into the hand of Joshua. Okay, real quick for any questions for chapter 2, comments, chapters? Okay, chapter 3, the fat man. Okay, Yahweh tests Israel. Is this one? Now, these are the nations which Yahweh allowed to remain to test Israel by them. That is, all who had not known any of the wars of Canaan. And so I want to point out when he says to test them, because of their sin, he allowed calamity to come upon them. So it's not that he broke his covenant with them, and it's not that he said, I'm going to turn my back on you. He's saying, because of your sin, I can't protect you. Because of your sin, I can't hold them back. Because of your sin, the dam is going to break. So this is clearly and strictly on them, not on Yahweh at all. Verse 2, however, God tested them in order that the generations of the sons of Israel would know war by learning war, especially those who had not known it formerly. Again, remember, this is the third generation. These nations are the 5 lords of the Philistines, and all the Canaanites and Sidonians, Hivites, who lived in Mount Lebanon, from Mount Baal Hermon as far as Lebo Hamath. And they were for testing Israel, to know if they would obey the commandments of Yahweh, which he had commanded their fathers by the hand of Moses. Well, the question is, did they? The answer is no. Now the sons of Israel lived among the Canaanites, the Hittites, the Amorites, the Perizzites, the Hivites, the Jebusites, all the ites. And they took their daughters for themselves as wives, and gave their own daughters to their sons, and served their gods. God told them, Deuteronomy 7, don't live among them, wipe them out. Why did he say? A lot of times people will say, well, the God of the Old Testament was the evil, wicked God. He wiped everybody out. But the God of the New Testament, he was a loving God. He loved everybody. He sent Jesus so that we could all love each other. Why did God say wipe them out? Why did God say don't live amongst them? To get rid of the evil. So what was wrong with the evil being there? He couldn't be present, and they turned into this. If the evil wasn't there, they would know no other way. But because it was there, they were living among them. Oh, you have an idol, and oh, look, you got an orgy over there? Let's go. You got drugs over there? Let's go. We don't have a leader to hold me accountable. I'm not going to hold myself accountable. The sons, 7. Thus the sons of Israel did what was evil in the eyes of Yahweh, and forgot Yahweh their God, and served the Baals and the Ashtoreth. The anger of Yahweh burned against Israel, so he had sold them into the hands of Cushan Rishathaim, king of Mesopotamia. The sons of Israel served Cushan Rishathaim 8 years. Then the sons of Israel cried to Yahweh. See, here we go. Oh, Lord, please help me. And Yahweh raised up a Savior for the sons of Israel to save them. Othniel, remember from chapter 1, the son of Kenaz, Caleb's younger brother, Othniel, the son of Kenaz, Caleb's younger brother. And the Spirit of Yahweh came upon Othniel, came upon him, and he judged Israel. And he went out to war, and Yahweh gave Cushan Rishathaim, king of Mesopotamia, into his hand. So his hand was strong against Cushan Rishathaim. 11. Then the land was quiet for 40 years. And Othniel the son of Kenaz died. So what's going to happen now? They're about to act up. Then the sons of Israel again did what was, how'd you know? Did what was evil in the eyes of Yahweh. So Yahweh strengthened Eglon, the king of Moab, the fat man, against Israel because they had done what was evil in the eyes of Yahweh. Okay, pay attention to that. Because they did what was evil in the eyes of Yahweh. Because you sinned against Yahweh. Because you did what he told you not to do. Because you didn't do what he told you to do. That's what this is saying to us. So when we read these things from 2,000 something years ago, we have to let it speak to us today. It's not, oh, they lived in stone huts, so it doesn't apply to us. They didn't have cars, it doesn't apply to us. This has to do with the evil and wickedness of the heart. This has to do with righteousness. This has to do with obeying God's word, doing what he called us to do. That's what this is about. That's why these are here. That's why we go through this every week. That's why we go through Torah. You know, the elders and I, we talk about you come to Yeshua's house if you want to learn the word. Not if you want to be preached at, not if you want to be, have a feel-good sermon, but you want to know what it says and you want to know what it means and what it means for our life. That's what Yeshua's house is about. It's not about preaching. It's about teaching. What does this say? What does it mean? How is it going to benefit me? How do I get it in here? Not how do I just say, oh, I'm a Christian, I wear a cross around my neck, I go to church every Sunday, then when I leave here, I can't show you what I do because you'll talk about me behind my back or in front of my face. Yeshua's house is about how to get this in here. That's why we're here at Yeshua's house. We talk about our numbers. We don't want the elders, we talk about, not how many people show up in the sense of, well, how many people do we have at Yeshua's house? But how many people can we reach? How many people can we get to walk like we want to walk like Yeshua's house wants us to walk? How many of us are going to be on that narrow path? That's why we come every week. That's why we do the Moedim. That's why we do what he calls us to do, because every week it reminds us of him. Every Moedim, it reminds us of him. Every time that we go to a Bible study, it reminds us of him. Not just so we can say, oh, I know this like the back of my hand. That's not what it's about. It's about being able to walk in such a way that our children will follow us and they will never fall off that path. And for me, every week that we bless our children, all of my children are grown. I have 100 grandchildren. A fifth of that. But I have a lot of grandchildren. And it's extremely important for me, for them, to not walk the walk that I walked when I was young. I didn't get on a more straight and narrow until I was older in life. I went to church, and I wasn't a bad guy. I didn't do anything bad, but I wasn't a good guy, and I judged good by my heart. I wasn't thinking every day, Lord, put something in me. Lord, take something out of me. But that's where we have to be, and for me, this is about our children. This is about our children. There are a lot of beautiful children here. And one day, they're going to follow us, or they're going to take a left. All right, we got 3 minutes. I'm going to zoom through the fat man part. So I'm just going to jump down to 15. Then the sons of Israel cried to Yahweh, and Yahweh raised up a savior for them, Ehud, the son of Gera, the Benjamite, a left-handed man. And the sons of Israel sent tribute by his hand to Eglon. Now, left hand is important because back then like today, most people are right-handed, and a right-hander would wear a sword on his left hip, and they would grab their sword like this. So when he went to go see Eglon, there are some commentaries that says that he was lame. He had a lame foot. He had a lame hand. That's why he was left-handed. The text doesn't say that, so I'm just putting that out there. But the thing is, he had a dagger that was roughly 18 inches that he wore on his right side. He gets in front of Eglon, and he gives him the story. Hey, God has a story for you. Sends everybody out, and takes the dagger. Bam. So they don't check his right side because soldiers didn't wear swords on their right side. So as we speak through this, I wanted to say that. Okay. 16. Ehud made himself a sword which had 2 edges, a cubit in length, which was about 18 inches, and he bound it on his right thigh under his cloak. Then he brought the tribute near to Eglon, king of Moab. Now Eglon was a very fat man. And it happened when he had finished bringing the tribute near that he sent away the people who had carried the tribute. But he himself turned back from the graven images which were at Gilgal and said, I have a secret message for you, O king. And he said, keep silence. And all who stood by him left him. But Ehud, it hurts me, I don't know how to say that. Ehud or Ehud? I'm just going to say Ehud. Okay, came to him while he was sitting alone in his cool roof chamber, and Ehud said, I have a message from God for you, and he rose from his seat. Then Ehud sent forth his left hand, took the sword from his right thigh, and thrust it into his belly. The handle also went in after the blade, and the fat closed over the blade, for he did not draw the sword out of his belly, and the refuse came out. So imagine how fat that is. You got an 18-inch sword, you get it in, the handle goes in, stuff comes out. Then Ehud went out into the vestibule and shut the doors of the roof chamber behind him and locked them. Now he went out, and his servants came in and looked, and behold, the doors of the roof chamber were locked, and they said, he is surely relieving himself in the cool room. So they come back and they go, oh, he must be sitting down. Then they waited until they were ashamed, but behold, he did not open the doors of the roof chamber. Therefore, see, he needs fiber. Therefore, they took the key and opened them, and behold, their master had fallen to the floor dead. Now Ehud escaped while they were delaying, and he passed by the graven images and escaped to Sarah. Okay. He passed by the graven images on the way in, passed by the graven images on the way out. That is important. It is important because the graven images did not save him. He was surrounded by graven images. He was surrounded by his gods, and his gods did not save him. So, and you ask, why is that there? He passed by the graven images. That just sounds kind of innocuous. But when you think about going back to Egypt in the Exodus, and all of the gods were knocked down by Yahweh. Knocked down literally and figuratively. They were dealt with. The one with the bird beak fell on his face, broke in half. His gods could not save him. That's the point of why that's there. 27. And it happened when he had arrived that he blew the trumpet in the hill country of Ephraim, and the sons of Israel went down with him from the hill country, and he was in front of them. Then he said to them, pursue them, for Yahweh has given your enemies, the Moabites, into your hands. So they went down after him and captured the fords of the Jordan opposite Moab, and did not allow anyone to cross. And they struck down at the time about 10,000 Moabites, 10,000 again, all robust and valiant men, and no one escaped. So Moab was subdued that day under the hand of Israel, and the land was quiet for 80 years. So first it was 40 years, now 80 years. Now after him was Shamgar, the son of Anath, and he struck down 600 Philistines with an ox goad, and he also saved Israel. 301 time. Okay. Anybody have any questions, comments, or Jacob? Oh.
So names are always fun. Eglon is derived from the word egel, which means like fat cow.
Oh, okay.
Or a fattened bullock. So he gets killed. And then Ehud is to unite.
No. Ehud.
I defer to the elder. For that is your prerogative. Yes, sir. That gentleman's name means unite, or it's the derivative. So what happens is that at the end of the passage, he blows the shofar. Israel is united by a uniter, and then they defeat their enemies. So it's one of those cool things where you see the names tip their hat at things. So when you see Eglon, that's just the name version of saying Egel, which is basically he's a fat cow.
Yeah, we lose a lot by not knowing the Hebrew and the meaning of the Hebrew and the translations. Denise. Fat cow. All right, I don't want any of you people getting wicked and calling somebody, what is it, Eglon?
So on the name vein and the left-handedness, apparently left-handedness was a kind of predominant trait among the tribe of Benjamin, because the footnote in my Bible refers us to Judges 20, verse 15 and 16, that says, "On that day there were 26,000 men from Benjamin armed with swords, besides the inhabitants of Gilgal, who numbered 700 specifically chosen men. All of these 700 specifically picked men were left-handed, and everyone could sling a stone at a hare and not miss."
Well, I know one thing about, I'm left-handed. The entire world is built for right-handers. The entire world is built for right-handers. But in certain circumstances and situations, being left-handed is an advantage.
Right.
Like when I play basketball, almost everybody I've ever played against is right-handed, so they go to one particular side and they defend to that side. But as a left-hander, you go in the opposite direction. It's harder for them to defend against you, you know, to block shots or to defend against you if they're not used to defending a left-hander.
Or in a sword fight with
Or in a sword fight, yeah.
Inigo Montoya. Princess Bride. I'm
Good,
not left-handed.
yeah. I'm an Inigo Montoya. You killed my father.
Yes, right. Well, I'll keep quoting. And Benjamin means son of my right hand.
Okay. Okay. Michael? Okay, if there's anybody after Michael, we'll just do one more, and then if you can come up and do the Aaronic blessing.
So to
sorry?
the point of what you just pointed out in the footnote, as a military man previously, the case is here that ambidextrous is what that really is saying. It's saying that the training was to be both left-handed and right-handed, which is also to David's credit. He could do it. He could throw that sling with either hands in case he was injured, and the same thing is here. But Yohad, as Yaakov just pointed out as his name, is united. So it's the idea that who sits on the right hand of God, and where are you coming from on this? So it's united again. It's the unification in Ehad's name that's really important to show how that whole thing ties together in the story.